Right. Good morning, everyone, on this lovely sunny but cool morning. Hence, I'm wearing a different layer because I'm not quite used to the temperature. Welcome, and let's open this risk assurance meeting. Are there any apologies? None. Sorry? No. Is Elizabeth's apology?
She hasn't said.
You need an apology? Okay. You'll move one. Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Johns. All those in favour, please say aye. Against carried. Are there any? There's no public forum?
Because we don't know if there is an apology.
Okay.
You can't fabricate.
Are you a member of the committee, Steve?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Okay, thank you. There's no public forum. Is there any, all the items, no late items? No, haven't been advised of any. So the first meeting, we need to confirm the minutes held way back on 21st of April. They've been circulated. Any corrections? Do I have a mover? Thank you. Seconded. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. This gets carried. Our first item on the agenda for discussion is the Tararua Alliance on page 15. Taken. Thank you, Dan. Taken as read. Any key highlights or further information? Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. I will just start off by, formally introducing Lee to this chair, this committee. She has taken over the performance manager role after Sally's departure. She will be continuing to help Andrew and the team in regards to the long-term plan process and updating the transport activity management plan. So we're just working on a transition process at the moment, but you'll be seeing Lee more often at these committee meetings. I suppose for a summary, with the zero harm space, continue to have great results with zero harm as we continue to track with zero lost time injuries and medical treatment injuries. So I'm proud to say that our total recordable injury frequency rating is still tracking at zero, which has been that case since September 2024. So a good result there. We did have a couple of first aid injuries in the last quarter. However, they were very, very minor. Didn't have any significant system failures, and that caused those injuries, and the employees are back to 100%. We continue to have improved reporting in the near miss space. So getting quite a lot of near misses coming through, and continue to encourage our employees to report anything there. And the biggest trend that's coming out of that continues to be driving. So that is our biggest risk for the work that we do out on the network that we work on. So, interactions with third party and the public on the roads continues to be the trend that's coming through on those reports. So we'll continue to drive training and additional controls or whatever we can do in that space to ensure that none of those lead to an incident. And our team continue to meet their targets in regards to their safety conversations and their critical role inspections and audits. So continue to track well in that space. For performance framework, so we've finished the initial scoring for the 25-26 financial year now that is over. So you'll see on item 5, page 17, the chart there that shows what the scoring is. So blue being meeting expectations, grey being that's we're meeting the maximum target against the KPIs. So we've exceeded all of the expected targets except for engagement. So you'll see that there's some areas of improvement there that's listed in the report. Keep in mind that this is just an initial audit. We will have the official performance audit happen later this calendar year. So it'll be around October, November, where we'll finalise what that scoring is and report that through to this committee. We did have, I mentioned in the April report that we did have a workshop booked with the principals group to update and refresh the Alliance strategy, which was carried out last month. So we are updating the 26-27 performance framework as we have had updated strategic priorities, which you'll see in the report. So we just want to make sure that our key performance indicators in the framework align with those priorities to show that we are achieving those priorities. And we do have the investment audit that was carried out in this report as well, just showing how we scored with the audit. So that's NZTA's investment audit that was carried out basically from the period of 1st of July 2021 to 30th of June 2025. The overall result of the audit was the rating was effective, which is a good result. There was some areas of improvement that was picked up through that audit, which you'll see on page 19, showing the key strengths, areas of improvement, and the actions that we're currently undertaking to address those areas of improvement. And then just going forward as well, we just made a mention in the report, especially with Lee now in the performance management space, that we will be looking at continuing to find ways that we improve this report going forward. So we will see some changes made to it, but any suggestions or feedback that the committee has in regards to what they want to see and what adds the most value, please let us know, and we'll do what we can to improve it. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions? Thank you. Yes, Scott?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thanks, guys, for your report. I think it probably goes down to the future reporting side, but starting at 4.2 under the safety compensations inspections part, great to see that there is a focus on those high risk areas. I think what I'm quite interested to see though is a little bit more narrative around what are you looking at doing to control those risks more, and just also seeing if we can be linking that back to any future reporting. So if we're targeting some training in there, what evidence are we getting to show that that's been successful? I think what's written is great, but I'd certainly value having a little bit more narrative around that.
Yeah, thank you. So the principals group have also recognised it, and that's why you'll see one of the strategic priorities that has been identified that we've reintroduced to the strategy is around health and safety. So we will be looking at reporting more on lead indicators and things like that in that space, as well as introducing more around our inspections and audits in regards to what we're carrying out, and as you say, the outcome that's coming from those audits, what actions we're putting in place to improve our health and safety compliance and culture. Such as independent audits, so we're looking at having more independent audits carried out by, when I say independent, I mean outside of the Alliance, but still within our organisation, so the likes of Gillian, the Down to Zero Harm Advisor across the East Coast, just having them do basically randomised independent audits across our frontline work crews to make sure that they're complying with what we've got in place.
Thanks, Chair Phillip. I have a couple of questions, if that's okay. Some of which is very high level through you, Chair, to you, Dan, some of which is a little bit more detailed. I reflected on, you must be audited out from from this report, but I think there's certainly a lot of merit in having the report that you prepared to us. Can I just ask a couple of questions on 7.5, Dan, on page 19? You reflected there around actions to address the recommendations, and I found in that table that the financial processes and some of the decision making around that. The first bullet point in 7.5 talks about strengthening financial processes. What does that look like? Thanks, Sarah. Sorry.
Morena, Chair and Councillors. I had a feeling this was going to come. So what actually occurred in this audit is, I think you'll recall from our last NZTA audit, actually, Councillor Wards, we got quite a bit of hammering in the financial strengths space. This time we completely reconciled $90 million budget. There was an error of $93,000, which came as a result of a manual adjustment in the year-end procedure. So from there, we have implemented further controls. We have changed the way in which we are dealing with emergency events, because this was a result of an emergency event, and we've increased our communication between both teams. So that's what we've done in this space.
Yeah, so then the next bullet point below there on the August deadline, we have missed that historically. Is that, and when I read further down in the document, it was about providing a spreadsheet. Is that spreadsheet something that we have to create just before the deadline and send, or is it a spreadsheet that's added to all throughout the year? And was this just because it wasn't scheduled that it wasn't delivered, or is there some complexity in behind there that meant that yeah?
Yeah, so this one is just a spreadsheet that to show NZTA the projects. We've basically split out the costs against the different low-cost, low-risk projects and sharing that spreadsheet through their transport investment online portal to basically prove where, will show the difference of where that funding's been spent. It basically was unbeknownst to us that was a process that NZTA had in place, and I suppose through the audit it wasn't raised as a major sort of concern, but it was just a recommendation that they wanted that going forward to basically see how that funding is being split across the different projects and being spent.
Yeah, so it wasn't a biggie at all. It was just something that didn't get picked up, and you've now got a process in place to make sure it is going forward. So yeah, okay, cool.
Can I just ask a dumb question on the financial side of it? My understanding, once upon a time, you could actually claim work done, although it wasn't paid for. Has the rules changed on that? Or can you actually claim if the work has been physically done, but the contractor or subcontractor hasn't actually invoiced, you can still claim, and then you've got to make sure what you've claimed marries up to what's been paid. Is that still the case?
I believe so, yes. I can't sort of elaborate more on that, but yep.
Yeah. But that is a potential risk that you've actually claimed because a subcontractor has been a bit slow in sending on the invoice, because it's, from a cash flow perspective, it's worthwhile getting the funds in advance.
From our perspective, we have the one contract that we deal with. You wouldn't be surprised with who it is with, but we can only claim the transactions that are in our general ledger to that effect. So only if it's been paid as part of our down and claim are we able to submit it for our NZTA funding.
A further question further in the report, Chair Phillip. Don't go too far, Sarah.
Oh, Sarah. Just stay there, Sarah.
The question I have now through you, Chair Phillip, to Dan, on page 21, the table that we're talking about with draft changes. In the execution, the creating sustainable value, I get a little bit nervous when I see we've removed it because it's too difficult to measure type statements. So I'm looking at the asset strategy, the financial decision making that gives effect to the activity management plan, and then in the column around the change, it says it's removed as difficult to measure. Given, and let me try and join the dots here, given the importance of our activity management plans, why is it that that's being taken out? I mean, you've reflected there'll be some mechanisms in the LTP, AMP we'll see better internal network performance measures, but we're taking it out of something. What's it going to look like in the next iteration? Because I would have thought when we think about our future assets and how we're going to be managing them, all of a sudden we're removing it because we can't measure it. Can you just join the dots for me as to the thinking around that approach? Thank you.
So with the current long-term plan and the current update that's going on with the activity management plan, it's been more clearer around what we are intending to achieve with the funding we have. So we had a mix of measures in the activity management plan which are quite easy to measure ourselves against. So for example, with our renewals, it's pretty straightforward. We plan to deliver 6.4% of the network for reseals every year and 0.2% for rehabs every year and so on. So those ones are easy to measure, but then we have some in the maintenance space especially, which is a bit more complicated, around like network trends and things like that. So, percentage of priority faults on the network at any given time could be under 7% as like a target that we have, but that can fluctuate throughout the year depending on a whole lot of different reasons. So we're just trying to be more clear on what measures we're going to have for that, because that's one KPI, but it basically reflects all the different measures in the activity management plan. So yeah, we just want to make sure that we are measuring our performance, not so much just general network trends that we sometimes don't actually have control over.
Chair Phillip, and I guess it's for this committee, it's a reflection that given higher up in the report, you're getting a bit of a smack around because the financial processes need improvement, and yet further down when we have the ability and a plan and a strategy to actually improve our financial decision making, you've pulled it out. Have I got that wrong, or is there just another way I should be looking at this?
No, you're right. I'm not going to try and answer the other stuff because that's for these two experts. But for the NZTA audit, it's a transactional audit as opposed to these measures, which are far better than just a transactional audit. That would. But.
Yeah, I guess the way that it's worded is the issue more than anything.
So on that, would it have been better to replace the asset strategy? And while I have the mic for a moment, I had another question down there on the asset condition roads, which is page 22, asset condition roads in the blue thing, about the fourth line down. The average percentage of travel on roads is smoother than the roughness threshold for each road classification. So are we moving from measuring the condition of the road to measuring how many inspections we do? Is that the thrust of what you're trying to achieve there?
So that measure was around our smooth travel exposure target, which is already a target in our service delivery measures, annual service delivery measures. So to basically, so that's a target that we're trying to meet anyway in a different framework measure. So we've decided to introduce an additional one, I suppose, instead of having a duplicate, by having the fact that we must ensure that we are inspecting and completing our cyclic patrols on the network. So the inspection being that we're identifying the faults across the network in the manner that in the timing that we have in our program, and that our patrolmen are going through fixing potholes, fixing signs, doing all the safety remediations within the program as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Philip? I'm going back to your dumb question. I just want to get some clarity on that. So what you're saying, claim on work done, but then in the next breath, Sarah said that if the invoices are not in, you can't spend the money. I'm just trying to get the difference between, obviously there's been allocation, and if the contractor's late in getting, like the work's been done, but the contract hasn't put his invoice in, how does that work?
So in regards to Diana claiming to council, we claim the costs that Diana has, throughout the year. So it doesn't actually become an issue until it gets into the financial year, because we don't want costs in one financial year going into another financial year. So the first issue is if a contractor is putting in a late claim during the months, then it just means that they're missing out on claiming for the cost of the work that they've done for us, but then we can't then basically on charge that to council through Downer. So it just backs up, and then it makes it more difficult to do forecasting and things like that, because we want to make sure that costs are within each month. But yeah, it really comes down to the end of the financial year, where if we don't have a claim come through from a contractor, we need to make sure that we're capturing our costs within that financial year.
Yeah, just supplement, so you don't lose the money because of somebody else's late work, or incompetence, or not incompetence, but late getting their books done.
We can if it crosses into a financial year.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, yep.
But that's the risk. You see what I'm saying? That's what I'm trying to make sure we've got.
So we get in a situation where we do, and from time to time, have to follow up with getting claims from contractors through to us, because we know that they've done the work for us.
Yes.
And we know that they haven't claimed for it, so we just need to work with them to make sure.
Is there a big percentage of that? Great. That's what I want to hear. Thanks.
Any other questions? Oh,
Yeah, just to appease my ignorance, in the actual NZTA report on page 7 of 14 in their report, which is page 29 of this report, it says a 30-70 split for street cleaning was checked and confirmed. Just who gets the 30? Is that 30 funded by NZTA, or do we pay 30? It was just curiosity thing, not a...
Just trying to read to make sure I get my side straight. So in regards to the subsidy, the 73% subsidy that we claim, we can only claim that on, is it 30% or 70? On 30% of the total street sweeping costs, and the other 70% is not subsidised.
one more? While you're finding it, right, I've got a couple in that same area. Just on page, in the NZTA report, on page, I've lost it, in the executive summary, on page 3 of their report, on page 25 of the agenda, in the third paragraph, I think we've talked about that one. In the second to last paragraph, they're talking about safe system audits, but their last sentence is renewals are also subject to NZTA safe system audit guidelines, but this does not appear to be occurring currently. Can you just explain what's meant by that sentence?
So basically, when it comes to our renewal activities, where we're doing like-for-like replacements, we need to be applying for exemption to NZTA if we're not going to complete a safe system audit. Those exemptions haven't been applied for in the past, so the recommendation going forward with their guideline is that we make sure that we're applying for those exemptions. Because basically, like you say, the guideline hasn't it that any renewal or any basically improvement activity needs a safe system audit done on it. So basically, that's our baseline that must happen. But as I mentioned, if we're doing a like-for-like replacement and we internally haven't identified any safety concerns with that particular area that we're doing our renewal on, then we'll do a risk assessment and determine whether we can apply for an exemption and then put that forward to NZTA. If they decline the exemption, then we will have to go ahead and do a safe system audit. But that has to be done independently, so the concern that we have is around the costs of undertaking that.
My other question had been answered, but previously. But on that, I assume the cost of doing an exemption is a lot less than the cost of doing an audit.
Yes, because we'll be able to do that exemption internally. Yep. But not to say that we don't want to be doing it. Like if we're doing a safety improvement activity, then we'll carry them out to make sure that we are obviously improving the safety of that section of road or whatever we're doing.
It's on the theme of the safe system audits, through you, Chair Phillip, to Dan. So page 10 of the NZTA report, page 32 of ours, it reflects there that there were 5 safe system reports viewed. And yet in the next paragraph, it's noted that none of the projects audited have actually been delivered, which I find slightly bizarre. They've audited 5 projects that actually haven't been carried out. What's the ability to randomly select stuff that's actually occurred on that? I mean, I got a sense, Dan, from what you're saying around you can apply for exemption, and while we're still waiting for this, you know, the risk assessment to come in, but why would they audit stuff that actually hasn't even been done?
So audits can also be undertaken, like if we have like an incident on a network where we've had a serious injury or a death, or if we're getting customer requests around a safety concern on a network, then we can get those audits carried out. And then from that audit, we'll get recommendations in regards to what can be done. So, yeah, for example, like if a customer's complaining about an intersection and there's concerns with the intersection and the safety system audit's done and they've recommended that we can do this, and this, then if we don't have existing funding that can fund that project, then we need to apply through the low cost low risk funding, and that's what wasn't approved, or that's the funding we didn't receive.
Just a couple of supplementaries to that. So what happens if you don't apply for a safe systems or exemption? You do the work, and then it is determined that you should have. What's the consequence?
I suppose the consequence from NZTA's point of view, if we're not following their guidelines, then it is going to affect funding that we receive from them going forward. So we need to make sure that we are following their policies, procedures and guidelines, so that we're complying with their procedures, which is obviously what they audit through this process.
Thank you. And my last question is, I'm slightly confused on procurement on page 9 of 14 of their report, page 31 of the agenda. Second paragraph, it's saying there are no major improvements undertaken during the audit timeframes because the works were delivered through because all the works were done through the Alliance. That's about procurement. So they don't look at your procurement as part of that. They're just looking at the council's procurement. I just don't quite get the fact that they're saying there's been no major improvements, and I thought we were on a constant improvement track.
I suppose the audit that they're undertaking is on Te Aroha District Council in regards to their procurement, but they do have looked into how the Alliance, I suppose, procures on behalf of council. So some of the information that's below that, like the table there, is actually related to the transport procurement strategy, which is currently being updated at the moment. So the Alliance follows that strategy, which NZTA has endorsed, so that they're happy with how the Alliance is, I suppose, procuring on behalf of council to an extent.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you, Dan and team Lee. Thank you for your work. All right, appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you in October. Keep up the good work. I'm sorry about the grilling, but I think it's important. Right? It's very appropriate. I had a number of questions as well that were all answers. That's great. So can I have a mover that we receive the recommendation on page 15? Councillors, thank you, councillors. Thank you, Councillor Sharon. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. This gets carried. Next item is our item 7.2, our risk management report. Thank you, Stephen. Take the report as read. Any key highlights or further information you want to bring to the committee's attention?
Thank you, Chair Phillip. Morena all. Just a couple of things to get started. The report does look a little different to previously. Been taking on board feedback from the committee, and also been doing some work with peers at other councils and reviewing the terms of reference and trying to help the committee in its role with a stronger link to the risk management framework and council's risk appetite, as well as giving clearer visibility around management's assessment of the risks. So very happy to have any feedback from you about the report and how it's presented, and if it's helpful or not. And the report this time has a focus on some deep dives So covering off legislative reform, a deep dive on our risk around people, capacity and capability, and a look at two of the key projects, the YT Waters transition and the long-term plan. So the first section is on legislative reform, which is a fast moving beast, with a further announcement yesterday from government about changes to RMA reform with mana whakahono Arohi changes. And also to mention that I didn't put it in the report, but also relevant to the committee is the position of non-elected members on committees as well is changing. So got lots of experts in the room, so if there's any questions on that section.
Yeah, I think let's do it by section. I think let's talk about the legislative change and the consequence on council of that would be great. Thank you. Council.
So only, you've already answered the MWAR one. I'm not going to try and pronounce it. The only other thing that I thought there was under the legislative changes, which is really covered under the Head Start as well, but I felt like it might be, there's a risk of the regional council governance changes. We don't quite know what that is yet, and whether our mayor is going to have to become a regional councillor. So yeah, that if we can add that in somehow, or just even in the commentary on the Head Start, that's an unknown at the moment.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. No, I don't have a huge desire to become a regional councillor, for the record. From what government has announced, though, and this is probably part of the issue and why it's been presented in here, because there are still some unknowns, but government has now suggested that a backstop process would be similar to what they consulted on late last year. They've also said that will not come into play until after the 2028 election. So for this term, if we weren't moving into a Head Start, which is still to be decided by council, then that wouldn't be happening in a CTB model. If it was a Head Start that council decided to do, and I've been pretty clear on having some reservations around that would be up to the participating councils to develop the governance model, which would encompass regional council responsibilities. But herein lies the problem. Very, very difficult to write a report because government seems to be making policy and announcing policy almost as if it was legislation each day. Yesterday, as was briefly mentioned, the mana whakahono Arohi agreements that we had been working constructively on spending money on have been scrapped by an announcement at a podium and a letter from the minister. And it does make it very, very difficult, and it's almost its own risk for us as a council to be responding not to legislation, not even to draft legislation in a lot of cases, but in statements from a podium. And it's frankly disappointing, but is a risk for us.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. I can totally agree, and this is what worries me. We saw this beginning with the example you're referring to at the conference in Christchurch last year, where they announced that all RMA plan stops unless you had actually got to the hearing stage were suspended. But the legislation didn't actually come out for another couple of weeks after that, so that actually gave some councils an opportunity to actually start the hearings. So, this is the problem. The government makes a policy statement and then there's no supporting legislation. And if you look at the Head Start, particularly on the indicative, and in Appendix 3, the Simpson-Grierson timeline, I think there was a typo in it. I think it should be Q3 2027, not 2026, but I think because this gets out of alignment, but that's Simpson Greerson's typo, not yours. But that's the problem we've got. This timeline is based on policy statements. We actually haven't even seen a draft bill. And then if we go back to the Systems Improvement Bill, which is not listed as one of the, because we thought it might be already enacted, it's still on the too hard basket. And yes, removing my voting rights may or may not happen. Because again, it was a policy announcement, and I have been advised that the government have been advised separately that this may cause problems for those councils who are setting up a water CCO. Those councils setting up a water CCO have also appointed independent members with no council representatives because they want the appropriate skills, just like you get a director. But now those committees have no ability to make a decision. So again, the consequences of these policy statements are far and wide. It doesn't really worry me that I don't have a voting right in this perspective, but I think the consequences are more than what they anticipated, and that's the problem we've actually got. And there's also other challenges with the Systems Improvement Bill, because as Sarah will hopefully be aware of, there's a new reporting framework coming out that's part of the LTP that MCERT, which is another new super ministry, has published based on the basis that the System Improvement Bill is enacted. So again, we've got all these, and I call them a tsunami of changes that we've got to be careful that we keep our heads above water. And that's the bit that worries me. It's the amount of change.
So legislatively, we're only required to act with what's currently law, isn't it? We don't have to comply with policy, but we need to be aware of the policy because that, yeah, I'm asking as a question because I'm ignorant on the matter. So.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And yeah, see, the Chief Executive may have a different view, or hopefully will back up mine. We will see. It is a really fair question, though, Councillor Naylor. The risk, though, and looking at the context of this committee, is if we do just follow the law, which is actually what we're able to do, we do know that the carpet could well be pulled out in front of us. We already have some examples. The chair mentioned the plan changes where councils were sent formal letters saying stop. There's also reputational challenges because from the very same podium that is announcing policy, they are also quite quick to criticise councils that are stepping outside of their policy framework. It would be high risk for us to ignore policy statements from government, particularly when they are giving us a direction. That doesn't mean that we have to totally change everything we're doing until the law changes, but we do have to be ready in anticipation for that change. And that's probably where the issues arise, because if we just carry on in our merry way, a little bit like the mana whakahono arohi agreements, and I'll just mention those briefly now. Those are not agreements initiated by a council. Those are invitations that are sent by iwi. Councils are legally required under the current legislation to work through those, so in good faith and in compliance with the law, that is exactly what we've done and spent money doing so. But knowing that government is going to make that change, it would not be a good use of our time, of iwi's time, of anyone's time, continuing with something that government has put a red line in saying that it would stop. It is, yeah, I don't like rule by decree, and unfortunately we are seeing more and more of it.
Through you, Chair. Probably not a lot more than I can add. I think that the Mayor has said it perfectly. The reality is we are required to comply with legislation, but at the same point in time, the Council is very cognizant of using ratepayers' money responsibly. And when we are drawn into a situation where the legislation and the mana whakahono o rohi is a perfect example, where it says we should do this, but the policy statements and what we saw happen yesterday, and so I've just circulated the letter which we received from Minister Bishop this morning, which makes it very clear that activity in this space will be wasted ratepayers' money, and it will be wasted time for iwi as well. So it's a bit of a delicate balancing act, but certainly anything where we need to do it legally and puts the council at risk if we do not comply, we absolutely need to do. But as the Mayor has said, we need to be listening to what the signals that are coming from government and then make decisions about where we absolutely need to continue and where we may need to give pause. And the mana whakahono o rohi is a perfect example where I'll need to communicate with iwi now about what we've seen come from government in the last 24 hours. I'm sure they're very aware of it, and we need to have a conversation then as to what that means.
I'm no lawyer. I need Google to help me here, but there was a case where, well known in the legal fraternity, of Fitzgerald versus Muldoon, on where the then Prime Minister made a policy statement, which then took some time to act. And of course, people then followed the policy statement, not the legislation, and some others got pretty upset about it. And so there is already legal precedent there. I'm no lawyer, so that I will just highlight, if you want some, Jess wants to comment on that, all right? No. I won't throw you under the bus, Jess, right? But to me, there is legal precedent there, and we have to be very careful what we actually do in terms of just following a statement. Thanks, Jess. Sorry to throw you under the bus.
Good morning, everyone. I'll just say one thing, and that is while there is a whole host of changes coming at us, where we have a question about whether we should be acting or not acting, we are getting legal advice. So we're not going to be charging off in a direction around a policy or not acting when we think it's really sensible. So we're doing a risk assessment and we're getting legal advice if we need that. So be assured that, any advice we're giving to you, we have considered that. And I think it's really important that we do that on a case-by-case basis, because there are so many things that we need to take into consideration for each piece of potential legislation that is coming our way. So,
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. And look, we were talking about mana whakahono o rohi agreements, but actually the best example of this is simplification of local government, and the amount of time, effort and expense across the country that has gone into a piece of work that does not have one piece of law behind it. It is literally announcements from podiums and government press releases, and it's extraordinary to see without even a legislative outline what this might look like. So it is very interesting, and it is great as a council that we are taking the time to review things, but it is also balancing that risk of, if we do nothing, when that legislation comes in, putting us in a really negative position if we haven't done anything. So it is a real catch-22, and just to say, we are very, very grateful for our legal counsel's advice as we navigate some of these very uncertain times. So thank you, Jess.
Just to give it some balance, I was listening to the minister this morning, and as he said, when this first arose, there were only eight on the table, and then of course it just ballooned, and they did admit they weren't in step with what they were doing, and hence, and I think probably putting the brakes on this is probably a betterment for our prosperous country going forward.
And thanks, Councillor Wallace, and I've heard those statements as well. And not to get into the rights and wrongs of it, I think the point that I was trying to make more is the whole reason why there was a flood of these applications was because of the way that the law was drafted, which specifically allowed for them and specifically said that any agreements initiated would be honoured in the new legislation. I think that any group that had a short window to get an agreement in that protected existing rights as they saw them would be unwise not to have taken that opportunity. Whether you agree with them or not is almost not the question. I think what I find challenging is that government is, and I'll pass this on directly, is almost blaming local government for a situation that they created with their own legislation. I also know that over a fairly long period this has been raised directly with central government as to what the impacts might be, and it appears now, frankly, to have only caused action when some very influential lobby groups have got involved and raised the alarm bells. So I don't take anything away from what you say, Councillor Wallace, but it is not a problem of local governments making.
Any further discussion on our legislative change? Oh, Councillor Sharon, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Phillip. I think this has been very useful, and I do want to commend you. You asked us at the start, Steve, any feedback on the style of the report. Fantastic. I've really appreciated the way you've broken down each of the issues, the deep dive, the whole approach has been very logical and rational. So thank you I actually reflected after I'd read it and thought, boy, you must have put some hours into putting this one together. So thank you and congratulations. I think the discussion we've just had is very reflective of the statement that you make in 3.1 around strategic influence and how all of this reform coming at us, you've reflected on from a risk perspective. The key issue is still our ability to interpret all of this messaging and then reflect on what's the best deal for our community by us doing this. So for me, that one bullet point summarised, whoa, this is a risk, and we need to be very transparent. We need to be very considered as we work through each of this, and the way you've put this report together enables us to do this. So thank you, Steve. I have questions as we go through. Chair Phillip, surprise, surprise, but I thought it was useful to try and set that scene from my perspective.
So if there's no more questions or comments on the legislative comment, I've just got one just to talk, right? And I think it just sums it up in para 13.14. Basically the principal risk, and that's what I like. Thank you, Steve. That's to me is the summing up of it. The principal risk here is the ability to continue to deliver services efficiently and sustainable while responding to this legislative change. So it's a distraction. We don't have staff sitting on our hands waiting for the phone to ring from Wellington to say, oh, we're looking at this, can you please respond? They are already under the pump, and this is just adding to it, which I think we're going to talk about some of the consequences later on in the agenda, so we'll move on. Next section probably is the deep dive into inadequate staff, resources and capacity, which is probably, if I'm right, team, right, I'm looking at the whole team here, this has been driven partly by the legislative change. Right, carry on, thanks.
Thank you. Yes, so that's top of page 43. So this deep dive, the principal reason for bringing it to you is that there has been a risk assessment, or a reassessment of this risk done, and proposal to bring the residual risk rating from moderate to high. So the report just details around how that risk assessment was done, what our current controls are, what new treatments management has in place and is developing, and how the risk is sitting in comparison to Council's risk appetite in this area. So those are kind of the themes in this section. If there's any questions?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your work on this and to the whole team. I think it's really important that it's put in this way, although still concerning. One request, I think, for further reporting is if we're moving in that particular risk of capability and capacity, when we have a number of important legislative requirements that we need to meet, I think if it's moved from moderate to high, we need to have some visibility and reporting of that in each risk and assurance meeting from now, particularly on whether the controls and the mitigations that are being put in are working effectively. But that is something that from the deep dive, until that risk can move down from high, we need to have very, very clear visibility of it.
Yeah, so following on from that, my question was around 4.10 on page 44. The sustained workload pressure also has a potential flow-on effect for staff well-being. Do we have a current situation versus a previous situation versus, going forward a future situation? Are we seeing an increase in sick leave or an increase in absenteeism, or, have we a tricky thing to measure, I know, but I think to Scott's point, we need to see if this is increasing or decreasing, because then if it's decreasing, then we can say, okay, we can now move the high back to moderate or whatever, but there needs to be some sort of measure.
Morena koutou, thank you for your question, Councillor Naylor. So considering this section and what you will see further through the reporting, and particularly in the Health and Safety Wellbeing Management Report, there we have provided some commentary about the number of wellbeing reports that we are getting through our safety system. So that's one really good link through to this risk. In addition to that, our current absenteeism rates and things like that is certainly something that we can look at. That is a manual process for us now, so it is quite difficult to draw out of our system. However, we do have a project at the moment for implementation of a HR information system, which will make that information far easier for us to track and monitor, and we do intend to bring more things like that through in this reporting. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
So in short, you couldn't tell that Monday's a favourite day that everyone doesn't turn up?
I could tell you that, but it is a manual process for us to go through and look through that data. It's not something that is easily at our fingertips, so it does take time and effort to pull that information together.
The council room's not that big, surely you must have a feel for general, since this has all hit the fan, you must have a feel for how it's out there. I mean, these are words, and we all appreciate the area which everyone's swimming in now. The current's different. They're all swimming against it, and I feel for them, literally. Is there a change?
So your question is there an increase in absenteeism rates?
Correct.
Thank you. I think this time of year, we always see an increase in absenteeism rates, and that's for a variety of reasons, including cold and flu in the winter season. So I don't think that there is a noticeable difference in absenteeism rates at this point. Oh, yeah, from what would be expected. However, without looking at the data, I couldn't say, but if you're asking for a general feeling, that's the general feeling.
I'd actually like to make an observation, right? So I'm seeing increased workload around the countryside, right, in all aspects of local government. And different people respond differently. And I think that's they may not be absent, but they may be absent because they don't know which way to go, right? There might be people who are just building it up, and you've got no idea until all of a sudden it goes woof, right? But there are people there that actually thrive on it. So, and we're all different, which makes us interesting people. So I think that's the hard bit for Sandy and the chief executive to help monitor that. But I think I would be really keen to help in terms of future reporting. We've got direction of travel on 4.13 of the report that the risk may deteriorate. And I think we as a committee need to monitor that and what is the consequence. Because my real concern is good people are leaving the sector, and I'm not saying that we need all dinosaurs, but a lot of that institutional knowledge is walking out the door in terms of processes. And to be honest, I'm having the busiest period of my life, which demonstrates the amount of work that is out there. And I see it like in 4.13 going to get worse, not better. So we've got to be very careful, and maybe it's a discussion that the council needs to have with this increased workload. What we probably need to stop doing things, because we need to make some strategic decisions. Now that's a council decision because of the significant consequences. Like you're saying, we're all swimming uphill at the moment. Swimming uphill isn't much fun. The water gets very shallow. Absolutely. Sandy?
Thank you, Philip. Just to add to that, I suppose the key risk here is if we don't reprioritise and look at what we can shift, the risk is that we will see a deterioration in the quality of work and continued deterioration in the wellbeing of our teams. So, thank you.
So I'm going to now question back to Steve. Can you make this report giving us the critical information more efficiently without putting you under any more stress? Think about that, right? We've had a good discussion. We now know about the risk. So next report should be about what is actually changing, rather than, it's where are we going? What's the big stuff we need to be thinking about? Ms. Scott and then Councillor Sharrow.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. And no, I had written a note in here of what can we drop if we're fully stretched. And thank you for raising that, Mr. Chair, and saying that council needs to have some discussions around it. I would be keen for this to move to another stage of where actually council does have some rich discussions about what perhaps we could park or what we need to look at. I think you certainly have. I think this committee is absolutely hearing what the challenges are, and certainly elected members would like to be a part of that solution for the team. So if that could please in some form come back through to us for some further discussion.
Thanks, Chair Phillip. And once again, Steve, I commend you on the insights that you've shared in this particular section. It's quite courageous to say, actually, guys, the next 12 months are going to be awful. And, well, they are. Well, that's what they're saying. The risk is going to deteriorate over the next 12 months. It's quite a courageous statement to say that. And I commend the analysis you put in behind and the thinking behind that. There are still a couple of things. In 4.16, Steve, you've mentioned the downside risk currently outweighs the opportunity for short-term improvement. So we're not at a stage where we can go, okay, this is the lowest, now we can go up. So I definitely support Mayor Scott and Chair Phillips' comments about we need to reprioritise if that's one of the levers we need to pull. The concern I have, and I was going to reflect it later, is there's a long time between cups of tea of this committee, and I'm not sure this committee is the only mechanism through which we perhaps need to address this. But I just thank you for saying it the way it is, because it's obvious we need to do something. So thanks, Chair.
Thank you. No further discussion. We move on to the next, my favourite subject, LTPs. Right, thank you, Steve.
Yes, so this section 5 on page 46 just provides an overview of the top risks in the long-term plans project risk register, and basically the summary view of that is that that project is stable and still delivering on track. Any questions?
I knew I'd highlighted this particular section. So 5.24, the risk 5, the iwi and Māori engagement. Steve, I'd highlighted that. I mean, you've obviously, it's a very important risk that needs to be managed, but how are we doing the ongoing management and further assessment, 5.26? Because, we sit around this table, we've had, I guess it's probably fair to say, limited participation at this level. Now, I know it happens regularly at operational, but the input and the value that iwi could add during some of these critical LTP discussions, what are we doing about it effectively? Oh, I don't know who you're going to look at to answer that. I guess the risk for me, to just add value to what Jess made comment on, is there a risk that when we get through the LTP process, we've had what appears to be, to me, visible non-participation, comes and goes. What is the risk that we get through the LTP process and iwi indicate to us that, well, we haven't been able to participate, we can't necessarily support what the next 3 years might look like? I guess that's where I'm trying to get to.
I'll give this a shot. Thank you for your question, through you, Chair Phillip. So, as Steve kind of indicated in his report, which I was just having a little read through, we are pulling together a review of all the ways that we can ensure participation of Māori and iwi in this process, the LTP process and our processes. And we've done quite a bit of work in that space actually, which is cool. And that obviously that's through the operational side of it, but we are also looking at, newly established governance portfolios and things and the work that's happening there to an extent. And what we wanted to do was present that report first through to ELT and then obviously through. We obviously haven't got that far yet, so I don't know if I'm speaking out of place, but I just wanted to provide a little update about what we're doing in that space.
Thanks, Chair Phillip. And thank you for that information, Jess, which is well reflected in the report. I suppose one bit I just want to make sure that we clarify of the statement from Deputy Mayor Wards. I don't believe that there could be a view, as it was said, of that iwi haven't been able to participate within the process. So I don't think there's a risk that we will get to the end where it will be iwi would say they haven't been able to. So the invitations to all of our long-term plan discussions are there. I also don't think it is the role of us to be forcing participation and requiring that. I think that would be stepping well outside of our scope to be doing it. But like Jess alluded to, they are not the only mechanisms for engagement. They are often the most visible, and I think that we will see an uptick as our conversations in the long-term plan change to become more meaningful. Some of them have been quite transactional at this stage that may elicit more direct interest. But there are other mechanisms. For example, the Chief Executive and myself will meet with iwi leaders to be discussing matters of interest. And our two different iwi will like to do that in different ways. And that is okay and something that we can respect. The other part that we have is, as we build our long-term plan and go into consultation, just because we have participation throughout the process does not stop iwi from being able to take part in the consultation process as an organisation as well. So I think this is important here to be identified as a risk. It's actually a good time to be deep diving in. Most importantly, to be making sure that it's working for iwi who we have signed memorandum of partnership agreements with, but is also helping inform our long-term plan with important voices from our community. Our portfolios were mentioned, they will be utilised, and I think there are a number of groups that we could do better engaging with. So very good to see that this is coming through. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Phillip. Yeah, no, I agree along with the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor there, because it's quite, if you read it, sufficient meaningful iwi participation. Well, the doors are never closed, and we've always been inclusive in the whole time I've been on this council, and we all practice the principles of Margarete. You know, I mean, if we could do that 365 days of the year, which we all do in this room, you know, think of the past, think of the present, and unite in the future going forward, we would just become unbelievable. And I think this council does practice those pillars of Margarete, you know. So I really don't, that kind of there, that, yeah, I think meaningful iwi participation, well, they've invited us, we invite them to everything that's going, every time.
So this is framed as a potential risk. We're not stating that this is indeed the case. We're just identifying risks that could show up throughout this project. So it's framed in the way that if this was to become an issue, this is how it would show up. Thank you.
Yeah, but that's what I can't figure out what would become. That's the question.
With the risk controls in place and plans in place and reviews that we're doing, I think that the project team agree with that.
Thank you. Through the chair, yeah, apologies, I was out of the room, just a call that I had to take. So obviously, when I read the report, I read this one and ruminated on this, and I think what's good about having this here and acknowledging it is that yes, we have relationships with many groups, and we should always be reflecting on whether our engagement with them is working or not working, and if there are things that we can do to actually improve that. But then, of course, we've got another layer, which is, as this under 5.28 in particular, calls out, is the fact that there are legislative requirements as well. And we need to be cognizant of those and make sure that we're meeting those as we go through this process. And I think that's fundamentally what this is about. It's about just understanding that we do have obligations and we need to keep an eye on those and be confident as we go through the LTP process that we actually meet those and deliver on those. So I think it's good it's flagged and we're watching it and we're acknowledging it, and because it will be a crucial part to the success of our LTP.
Thank you. Any further comments on the LTP? I've got a comment, right? I think this is still going to be a challenging LTP. I think the question I have, in your project planning, have you allowed for slippage? Right? There is slippage, excellent, right? And I also note, and I know this because from other councils, the audit office has not issued their plan and how to describe it, the way they're going to audit the LTP. I've had discussions at the highest level with the Auditor General on this because he is focused on reducing cost, and if it's reducing cost, hopefully that then reduces the amount of time our staff have to do it. So there might be some relief coming. I'll describe what they are because I don't know exactly what it's going to be looking like, but certainly that the Auditor General is taking a different view to the way the audit of the LTP will be undertaken compared with other years, which is probably a good news story. And I'll follow that up when we have another meeting. So just for full disclosure, I meet quarterly with other independent chairs, and we often invite the Auditor General, and that was a discussion at our last meeting, and we've got a follow-up meeting next Friday in Wellington, so I'll follow that up, and if there's anything further coming that, I'll inform the Chief Executive and his team. But I think that is a potential risk that we haven't talked about, is the audit approach and what that actually means. It to me is, and I have done LTPs, been involved in LTPs as long as I've been around, this is the worst one ever because of the tsunami of changes and the degree of uncertainty. And we just need to be light on our feet, right? And every other council is going to be in a similar position. I wouldn't want to be working for a regional trying to work out what actually happens to regional councils, because you've got, not only that, you've got uncertainty over the RMA. What is going to be our role as a council in the RMA suite of changes going forward? That's not 100% clear yet, but we've got a plan for it as part of the LTP. I rest my case, Your Honour, right? So, I think the issue is here we've got to be light on our feet, and I'm pleased to see later in the work programme that we're going to see the draft financial strategy coming into this committee meeting for our risk assessment of it, not to actually debate it. I think that's good. But again, we've got rates capping, which we're supposed to originally see draft legislation in June of this year. Well, we're now in July, and it's not on the the parliamentary program for it even to be actually put in front of the House. So where does rates capping fit now within the LTP? That's the degree of uncertainty. It's not just what's been talked about here. There's a whole lot of consequential uncertainty with the LTP. And that's all I'll say on the matter, and whether the Chief Executive's got anything to add.
Through you, Chair, I'm not sure there's much more I can add to that, but you are 100% correct, right? I mean, there's not only the reality of the amount of reform, but then the shifting dates actually creates more complexity for us, because where we think we're going to have clarity, the clarity does not arrive, and then policy statements, etc., build on top of that. So it makes it a very dynamic environment to try and plan and move operations and support governance in, whilst trying to deliver on what we need to deliver.
So changing context a little bit further, moving down to 6.5 on page 49. Oh, okay, all right. Yep.
Have you got any comments?
No, oh, yeah, so that's another thing, isn't it?
Yep.
Sorry, yes. Yeah, no,
Yep.
no further comments
Have
on
you
it.
got any comments on
Yeah, sorry, I didn't click. We were down to so the so 6.5, two key 3 water roles have been vacated. So with the transition to the CCO, if those roles aren't replaced or whatever, is that going to limit our the services that are provided to the Tararua district further down the track? I know it won't be council's problem, but just looking at our ratepayers and the impact on them, if those roles are then driven out of Masterton or somewhere else, could that have an impact? Are we recruiting for those roles, or are we just putting placeholders in place, or what's happening there?
Thank you. So we have been working with YT Waters on these role transition plans, and we've identified a number of roles that are on the direct offer pathway. So regardless of whether the role is filled or vacant, that is a role that we have a direct pathway into. So that role will be created like for like with YT Waters. Should they then choose to disestablish that is the risk, but we are actively recruiting for at least one of those 2 roles. The other role is not on a direct pathway anyway, so that won't have the same impact what you're talking about.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And it was also mentioned that that person or persons are going to be carried over in one meeting we had here. So they weren't. So they had some surety.
Yes.
Because the work's not going to go away. It's just going to be done in a different form.
Yes.
It's an opportunity.
So that direct offer pathway gives certainty to anyone who applies for that role that they will have that same role transferred under the same terms and conditions of employment. So it's legally protected into the new water entity.
Yeah, is 624 on page 50, the risk of incomplete or accurate transfer of assets, liabilities. I assume that all the high dollar items will be identified, and it might be just some minor things that we're at risk at, and so sort of, what percentage of the assets are we talking about that might be at risk? Are we talking 5, 10, 15, 20%? Just roughly, ballpark?
Through the chair, thank you for the question. The response to that is that there are some areas of assets that are less certain. We're working through stormwater in particular because there's a split between what is considered drainage and roading related activities. So that's defined by NZTA and their program requirements. But there's also a practical element of crossover where there might be a drain that is used for both residential properties, for instance, as well as the road. So hence the whole area of stormwater is particularly complex.
Any other questions? I've got,
Just supplementary to that then, so the percentage of the total assets of the waters is relatively minor that might be at risk?
Yeah, in that respect, yes. Yeah.
Can I ask a question which is not actually talked about on the agenda, but does affect from 1 July next year, YT Waters will be responsible for the billing. What's the transition plan? Is there one, will the council have any responsibility in terms of data? And there are a number of councils that are actually entering service agreements already to do that on behalf. And what does it actually look like? Confusion for ratepayers, etc. They're our ratepayers, they'll be the customers of this new of the company. So that to me is probably a bit of risk that we might need to have a look at in future. You got any comments on that? Either Peter or Steve? Thank you.
Sure. So very, very detailed planning underway for YT Waters to take over the charging. They want a very stable platform from which to work with. So they're looking at a IT procurement process right now to acquire the right software to do the job. They've already received our data, so they're already actively working on that. Does that help answer the question? So transfer by 1 July, yes, next year.
Being involved in systems, they never go according to plan if they're only acquiring it now. I just wonder whether I left the run too late, but that's right. Their risk, not our risk. But again, right, what's the consequences? Right?
They acquired the information in about January, February this year.
This year. I thought you said they were acquiring the software now.
The acquisition of the software on which the data goes will be there, but they've had the actual data for many months and have been modelling that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Philip. Yeah, just so out there, for people who've asked how their bill's going to look to the ratepayer, so that you'll have a rates bill, which hasn't got the Horizons bill in it. So you'll have a Horizons, a rates, and a water, and a power bill. Is that right? And they'll be those entities all like that.
Yeah. Sorry. Do you have a?
I know that the communications work stream for the project has been talking about this quite extensively, and I know that we are looking at how councils can provide sample billing notices, so what it will look like in the future to kind of help prep our communities on what the new billing system will look like. And I know that there has also been conversations at the project level about the billing takeover and business continuity options should they not be ready, which could include support from existing councils. We've kind of provided a deadline on when we would need to know a little bit more about that, or we would need confirmation so that we could make that happen for our systems. So I hope that kind of gives a bit of overview on the risk that you're talking about and confirmation that the communities will be spoken to, and there will be like a big lead-in period on this work for them to get used to that new billing system.
So that partly answered my question, which was another question that wasn't addressing any of the points on the thing, was, who is responsible for educating the systems, citizens of the impact? And, is that a council liability or a YT Waters liability? And who's actually, obviously there's a plan in place, which is great to hear, the communications plan, or is it a joint effort by both?
I think we have a shared obligation to our ratepayers, our community, their customers, our ratepayers. And so we're working really closely together on some of these things to make sure that the transition is smooth for our people. This transfer is about ensuring sustainable services, water services are continued to be delivered to our communities. And I think if we didn't share in this, it wouldn't land the same way. So I think we both have obligations to make sure that that's well understood.
Thank you, Peter. All right. So we need to go back to page 38, where we've got a list of recommendations. I just thought we'd just receive the report and move on, but thank you, Steve, for one or two recommendations there. Basically, I think we obviously need to receive the report, right? Just looking at the recommendations, I think we have, I don't know, sort of how to take all our comments on and put them into the appropriate resolution. But I think the issue is here that there is significant risk, right? And the risk, while we talk about in the LTP as being stable, right? It's currently stable, but it's not certain. So I'm just, maybe someone can give me some guidance on terms of what the staff are looking for in terms of, or do we actually, Mayor Scott, take some of these recommendations up to council, because we've talked about potentially reprioritisation. That's not the job for this committee by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's important that we say is these are now increasing risks, and council needs to be aware of them. Don't just leave it to the Risk and Assurance Committee to manage. It needs proactive direction from governance. Absolutely.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think maybe if we keep it simple enough, the resolution, that it doesn't tie officers up. From my perspective, it was, and I think that the Deputy Mayor also reflected the same, that we don't necessarily want to wait for another Risk and Assurance Committee, but I also don't want to be too prescriptive with staff. This should be really a mechanism for the Chief Executive and for staff to be able to have the discussion about reprioritisation with Council. So I would almost have the recommendation that the committee requests that the Chief Executive provides further advice to Council, either through workshop or formal meeting. And we could keep it there. If that is satisfactory through to Sandy. I'm not sure if there's another thought that you may have.
No, that's perfect. Thank you, Scott.
Right. So, yeah. No, so we've actually got a list of recommendations here. My suggestion is, do we need to go through all of them? You're happy to move all of them? With that additional? All right, got a mover. Do I have a seconder? All right. Any further discussion on that?
Just that 1.3E actually is a pretty broad, encompassing statement that caters, I think, for everything that's been discussed anyway. So, yeah.
Thank you. So no further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Thank you very much. Now the next report, the assurance report. Thank you. Yes, I'm conscious of time. All right. All right.
Thank you. So in a similar vein to the risk management report, look to make sure that this report is speaking in terms of the committee's terms of reference and council's risk management framework. And so therefore referring back when we're looking at the recommendations from audits, looking at how that affects council's risk and risk appetite. Again, really keen for feedback from the committee. The first section is the Audit New Zealand reporting update. So this just provides ongoing update on current open recommendations. And I guess the points to note in here that we're closing out two long-standing audit recommendations. So I'm particularly pleased to see the One Up recommendation now closed out after quite a long time, and thanks to Tracy and especially Sarah and Gavin for their work around getting that done. That will definitely hasn't had the workload impact that we expected it to have in terms of all staff needing to work to this, but I definitely noticed around the organisation conversations about expenditure and so forth as managers and staff have worked together on approvals, and this is a really important control for fraud and an expenditure control, so really pleased to have that one closed out. Yeah, and I think that's my main comments for now. If there's any questions about anything.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. First off, can I just express my delight in seeing so many of the items moving into complete. So, so well done to everyone involved. There was a lot that came through. So I was really pleased to see that. I did just want to jump down to. Sorry, actually, I'm going to need to find my place, so you could go to someone else.
I know my place here. So 6.12, the residual risk position, talking about procurement responsibility and delegated authorities. Is there an issue with the level that we've currently got with 36 staff holding contract signatory delegations? To me, to quote my fellow councillor, Mr. Johns, decisions devolve to the person closest to making them is the best form, and so I'm keen to see that we don't have delays introduced by having to go up to management, because I've seen that. I've been involved in organisations where that's happened, where there's a few people with a DA and they just get swamped with requests and things get delayed and it becomes a pain to get anything done. So I'm keen to see the devolution, down to, if so long as it's working and it isn't an issue, I'm happy for it to stay where it is. I would hate to think that we're bringing it back up for a perceived risk rather than there being an actual risk. That's a comment, probably.
Yeah, I'm just having a look. It was 4.1. This is jumping into the discussion of an independent review being required along the direct debit issue, and it's also alluded to in other parts, which I'm very supportive of, because I think that's an area I know personally I do want to have an assurance, and I think if we are at the point, and I think it is appropriate, that that officers are not able to give that assurance without an independent view. What I would like to know is when we can expect to have that assurance.
The intention is to provide that, the outcome of that internal audit at the October Risk and Assurance Committee meeting.
That was my big one as well. When are we likely to see that? Thank you. Yeah, one more.
Thank you. I'm just having a look at 6.1.3. There was a comment there just in the second line of that paragraph discussing a conflict of interest that wasn't managed. I don't want to know the details of that conflict. What I'd like to understand is if we believe that there's any further risk or any risk to us due to that conflict not being appropriately managed. Thank you.
Yeah, no risk from that.
I've got one, and it links back to the tsunami of changes. On para 6.5, page 72, we've got 17A monitoring. Now, the Systems Improvement Bill gets rid of 17A, but we haven't seen it yet, right? I mean, the other question is, I actually like the principle of 17A. So the question I have to the Chief Executive is, while it's no longer mandatory, you know, what's going to be your approach if that section disappears?
Through you, Chair. So I'm like-minded with you. So whilst indications are that the 17A will disappear, and we'll see when that comes through or not, I don't think there's anything wrong with the process. And us taking the time to properly evaluate the services that we provide to our community and understand how they're best delivered should still be a principle that we do. So in fact, we had a conversation in the last week where we were talking about a Section 17A, acknowledging the fact that the concept may disappear, but actually that process is something that we'd still want to go through to make sure that we're actually doing it correctly.
I also think that this strongly aligns to the draft strategic framework pillar about affordability and efficiencies. I think that we would be doing a disservice to our communities if we didn't continue reviewing how we deliver those services.
Oh, Mayor's gone. My goodness.
It's all right. I've been called worse. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you. Just speaking of the affordability and efficiency pillar, because one challenge that I've had with 17A or Section 17A reports has been the cumbersome approach that is sometimes required to meet all of Section 17A, which can create constraints for officers and can also become quite expensive to deliver the report. So delighted to hear that we still want to be reviewing our services. I'm in agreement with that. If Section 17A goes, it would be great to perhaps find a more efficient way of delivering that information.
Through you, Chair. So I would concur, and I guess we could say that we could embrace the freedom that the removal of the requirement of the 17A in terms of what needs to be done, but also still make sure that we are good stewards of the work that we do for our community and the ratepayers who pay for that.
Thank you. Is there any further questions or comments? The whole report. Yeah, thank you, Councillor.
If I wouldn't mind making a comment around 5.13, the Safe Plus assessment. I'm very keen to ensure that we continue following the framework of this and making sure that we don't miss the opportunity as it arises every 2 years or what the program is. Having been part of the auditors' interviews last week, I just think it would be behoving of the committee to pass on their thanks to the staff. Mayor Scott and I, when we were interviewed, we were very keen to understand the approach that staff had had towards this independent review. They reflected very positively. So a huge congratulations to the team. I know it would have taken a lot of effort and a lot of time. And I guess it goes back to my comment, Chair Phillip, in our previous discussion. In 5.16, the results will be reported to the committee later in the year. If there are some elements that come out of that report, I would be very keen to see them actioned quicker than while we sat and waited for a report to come through. But overall comment, thanks team, because it's a really valuable tool that we as governors can use into the future. So thank you.
Any further questions on the whole report? None. There being none, if we go back to page 56, we've got again a series of recommendations. I don't think we need any significant amendment to those based on the discussion. So can I have a mover for all of them? Thank you, Councillor Steves. Second, Councillor Peter. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. It's carried. Next item is our Health, Safety and Wellbeing Management Report. Thank you, Gillian. Take your report as read. Any further information or key highlights you want to bring to the committee's attention?
Good morning, Chair Phillip, and good morning, councillors. Thank you very much. Just a couple of things I'd like to point out. First of all, I'd like to apologise. As Steve mentioned earlier, we're trying to streamline our reporting and provide information that makes it clearer for you in helpful ways. And in doing so, I missed inputting a year-to-date graph of our incident reporting. So that has been brought to my attention, and I will ensure that is in place next time. Also, the question was put to me regarding near-miss reporting, which is shown in 4.2. There is no near-miss reporting specified in that. We have received reporting since this report was created, though, so it's not that it isn't happening. There was just none for that quarter, although sometimes when staff do choose the meta tag that they choose to report under, it may be it could fit into two categories, so they're choosing the category they feel best suits. So I hope that clarifies that for you. Happy to take any comments or any direction on what you would like to see in the reporting going forward. Thank you.
So on page 80, the pre-qualification of percentage contractors pre-qualified, the target's 100, we're at 89%. I assume the minus 2% is we're down 2% from last time. And then the contractor safety and audits inspections, we've got a baseline of 4, and that was down 16%. Was that one because we set the baseline too high originally, or what's the story there?
Thank you very much, through you, Chair. So that is the contractor safety audits and inspections is a new reporting that the committee's asked for that we are starting to talk to with the team. So it's not that this isn't happening within the teams, it's just capturing the data in a centralised way that makes it clear for what the team should be providing the information on to us, if that makes sense. I'm sorry, probably haven't explained that very well.
So 16 is the number of audits that we reported in our previous report. Oh, no, sorry, 20. So it's reduced by this, yes, that's correct.
Thanks, Chair Phillip. Can I just ask, is it a requirement of contractors to be qualified regardless of the job to be done. For instance, if you wanted someone to change a light bulb, do they have to be qualified?
Thank you very much, through you, Chair. So the information I have come across since joining Council is that in 2021, Council chose to shift to the pre-qualified system that we have in place, which is site-wise, and the expectation is that, yes, every contractor will be pre-qualified either through the site-wise system or for, in some cases, with contractors who are providing very low risk work, we could review their health and safety documentation in an in-house way and provide what we would call a in-house exemption pre-qualification. We do that for only very low level, potentially one-off instances. Our preferred option is to use a external pre-qualification provider like SiteWise. Thank you.
Thanks for that answer. That's good to know that it's not hard and fast, otherwise it would become silly.
I think that this also relates a little bit to the legislation change with the Health and Safety Act reform. So what we're seeing there is a focus moving to the critical risk. So we will have to make a call at some point as that legislation comes through, how we bring this in to look at our pre-qualification processes and what level of contractor is required to still go through those processes. And that's based on that real focus for critical risk management. So essentially, what the legislation will shift is that our contractors that are, is it fewer than 20 employees will not be held to the same standard for complying with the legislation. And so what that shift means for us at council. So we'll work through that process as we get through the legislation.
No other questions, therefore we go. Thank you, Gillian, for that. Go back to the recommendation. Do I have a mover for the recommendation on page 79? Councillor Peter. Do I have a seconder? Mayor Scott. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. The next one is health, safety and wellbeing due diligence activities. That's you, Sandy. Thank you, Sandy. Take your report as read.
Thank you, Philip. So the main thing that I did want to talk about in this report or seek your direction on is the scope for the Health, Safety and Wellbeing Governance Charter. So the Governance Charter is reflective of this committee's commitment to health, safety and wellbeing for the organisation, and it is part of our due diligence framework showing that commitment. So part of the process that I wanted to work through today was to understand or seek your review of the scope that I've drafted and see if that feels like it fits right with the commitment you want to make before going away and drafting a charter that I can bring back for your review and endorsement.
Comments or questions? Thank you.
Comment, it all seemed to make perfect sense to me, as much as I understand it anyway, so yeah.
The only question or comment I had, Sandy, was on the, I assume that's the three-year work plan in the appendix.
Yes.
I note that on the second page of that, page 94, we've got received waste minimisation report with no timeline. Do we still need to do that? Question?
There is no date on that because we were a bit unsure when we would be receiving that particular report, and we're working with the manager on when that will come through. So I can't give you the answer to that just yet, Philip, but I will come back to you.
Can I circle back and saying what's the risk here that we need assurance over?
Morning, Chair Philip and the rest. Sorry, Teddy probably just stole my thunder. It's a requirement we have to put out for the funding side of things through MFE. So it really is just, there's very little risk. It's just reporting back the achievements for the year to maintain the funding. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot. That's all right. Yep.
One comment. Thank you, Chair Philip. I'm completely comfortable with what's been proposed here. Sandy, the only question I might have is if there's anything that comes out of the report from the Safe Plus regarding the role and, scope and any of these items that they could be considered as well.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Sharon.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Just a comment maybe for some consideration. I think this is really important. I wonder though if it's important not just for members of this committee. All councillors are officers under the Act. So I wonder, I think perhaps coming to this committee for endorsement, but potentially having this come through a full council meeting could be of use.
So can I just clarify? So it would come to this committee and we would then recommend to council. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. A general question, Sandy, or to whomsoever. What is the situation with volunteers? Say a project to clean something up in somewhere, and it's done by volunteers. Is that acceptable to council, given the requirements for those that are paid to do a job?
Yes, so we do have a volunteer framework. So the main thing working with volunteers is that we have a good understanding of the work that they're doing and the risk profile associated with that, and that the appropriate controls are in place. So we have a volunteer framework that can be used by volunteer groups alongside officers in our health and safety team, supporting them to kind of document a basic health and safety plan. I do acknowledge that has probably not been as easy a process as some would like it, and we are looking to review how we can make it a lot easier for volunteers to engage with us.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Therefore, we've got two recommendations on page 87. Do I have a mover? Oh, I'll go with Councillor Peter, second to Councillor Steve. All right. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Next item is the asset disposal policy and guidelines. Thank you for stepping up to the plate. Take the report as read. Any highlights or further information you want to bring to the committee?
Thank you, Chair Philip. No, Tracy sends her sincere apologies for not being able to be here today. I am to take questions, recommendations, changes back. Please and thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment. I've been asking for this for a while, and so I'm really glad to see this come through, and it certainly covers a wide range of scenarios. So to Tracy and to everyone else involved, have my thanks.
Skipping through to the actual disposal policy itself, in section 1, the purpose, I just wondered whether there was a missing word. If I read the from where I'm talking about, manner that manages risk appropriately and seeks to minimise financial value, environmental, social and cultural. Should the word impact be there or some other word? Because it just didn't read quite right to me. What are we managing in the environmental, social and cultural? You know, is it the impact of those, or there's a line there, while minimising costs. But yeah, I feel like when I read it, I read impact in there, and they go, no, the impact's not there. It's like, so that was just a comment there. So on section 2 in the outcomes, the method chosen for asset disposal follows prescribed practices. And I think that we possibly need where those prescribed practices are. So as outlined in the asset disposal guidance, or, you know, there's a couple of documents, there's a different one for the IT stuff as well. So I realise this is just draft 1. Do you want me to carry on, or at the moment? Yep. No, that was, so in the so then I'd go down to the asset disposal guidance document. Unless anyone else is, I'll carry on while I'm on a roll. So on page 112, should the asset be retained due to heritage, cultural, social, environmental considerations? I feel like it needs commas at the end of each of those bullet points. Either that, or it's heritage considerations, cultural considerations, social considerations. And so, you know, commas with a after social and, you know, just to make it read correctly. And then a comment on page 113, might other businesses units be able to use the asset? You know, how is this shared? So someone's disposing of a vehicle for argument's sake, another part of the organisation might be looking to procure a vehicle. You know, I don't know whether it needs to be in this document or not, but certainly there should be a process as part of the asset disposal process whereby there's a formal notification, hey, we're disposing of this vehicle, there is any requirement from anybody for a similar vehicle or something, just to make sure that we're not getting any, you know, because we obviously lose money. But I think that is all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a fundamental question. I'm a bit slightly confused. It says this policy doesn't apply to staff, right? Sale of assets to staff, and it's out of scope. But then there are various references to the process for sale of staff. Now, look, and it's basically there's no threshold of dollar value. Now, I've been worked in organisations where they've had surplus screens that are worth $2.50, and they've offered that to staff if they make a donation because the cost of disposal outweighed the cost of selling it. You know, they got more from by selling it to staff than they would have actually sold it to the outline. Oh, sorry, I missed that. Sorry, my apologies. $200. My apologies. Wash my mouth, right? The other, all right. So the other ones too is so that solves that problem. My bad. Must have been asleep at that plane, or had a bump when I was reading it. The other one was too is the question. It's more question on the larger items. Is on page 114. Is we're talking about doing online search for similar assets for disposal. Is that appropriate? Right? You know, for example, if you maybe we need it's talking about by searching similar assets. Do we need actually? Is it too narrow? Right? because sometimes you actually might need to engage specialist advice. Other times online is appropriate, and how does the asset manager or whoever's selling it make that decision what's appropriate? Councillor Steve.
I'd say simply you'd use AI. There's a lot of information out there in all different fields. And the asset manager, I would imagine, well, the way this is a very good document, by the way, this draft. I like it because it stops people, it safeguards, it optimises what we want to get for the council, for the ratepayer, that optimises that, and we're not, and there are tools out there now that weren't out there 3 years ago. So I don't think there's a big, I'm not too worried about the dot on the I, this one.
All I was concerned about was online platforms. Online auction platforms, right? Because sometimes auctions doesn't actually get you the best value, bang for the buck. Because an auction you'll only get a good value if it's in demand. If you've got a specialist, product, right? That you might need some advice on. So how does that's just the question? Is this too restricted? Right? That comment. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying don't use AI. I'm saying is there might be occasions where AI might not be able to help you.
Well, that's where parliamentary. That's where your person who's in charge of this should be stepping up their knowledge base. I mean, I respect them.
Yeah, I'm just being pedantic. Does the policy actually allow it? That's my question. Right? Maybe it just needs or similar mechanisms or something to those. Yeah.
No, thanks for that. No, look, I looked at on page 113 for the assessment of value, which is fine, a market value of over more than 10,000, obtaining independent valuations from more than 2, which but it is making sure in unique circumstances that there is the flexibility to be able to get the best price for the assets in a timely manner. My other question, just in general though, is how this is split up into two. So, we've got the guidance document and the policy document, and usually in most of our policies we would have the policy and that would be everything. I understand I understand the structure, but whether that adds more risk of people, if you've got an out-of-date version somewhere, people having to match the two up. Just for usability, I wonder if it would be helpful having it as one policy document that included the guidance, and unless there was a specific reason why they were split out that I'm missing.
We can check that with Tracy, but I think that's a fair comment. I reflect on the changes that we've made through to our sensitive expenditure policy, which was to actually bring the guidance back in to make it a bit clearer. So we'll take that back to her.
I have a question on the out of scope on page 105. I was reflecting on, I was trying to sell some land and that's not covered. So I was pleased to see that. But why is the sale of assets to staff not within scope?
Off the bat through you, Chair Phillip, I would say it's because staff should be covered under the sensitive expenditure policy. But I do think from memory, and I'm going to throw Stephen under a bus if he doesn't mind, I think there's a section that refers them back to this policy. So maybe we just need to refine that, close that loop completely for you. Is that right?
This does defer this.
Yeah.
Yeah, a comment on the actual difference between the two documents. I think the disposal guidance, so the policy allows for disposal by two different mechanisms. So it can either be done under the asset disposal policy guidance or the IT disposal guidance policy. And that might be a reason why it's been split apart. But yeah, that was just, when I read it, I read the same sort of thing, but I noted that there was two different disposal policy guidances, one for assets, one for IT.
Just on page 103, I don't know who to thank, but on our values, how we work, I thank the person that put the English translation in for those words. For the people that are not coherent with Te Reo. But I would strongly suggest, like on the 15th of July, I was held down. I couldn't have it in English in brackets under the words. 5 days later, this is great to see someone's listening, and it's in brackets. I can't actually, the first one, it says be true. 2, I can't quite see it. And then 3, on the same words, honest, genuine and sincere. That's what that word means. And then the next word means to move outward and upwards, to grow, to spring up, and then I can't read the next 2 words. What I suggest though, those are very, for people that are reading our documents and not understanding Te Reo, they need to be bigger, because even if you go to Specsavers, you can't read those words, and you can't read them on your screen either. But again, sincere thanks for putting that English interpretation in there.
No further questions. We then go back to the recommendation. I think we've made those amendments. Thank you. So you happy to move?
Yes.
Do I have a seconder? I'll second. All right. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Next item, I know we should have actually had a break 4 minutes ago because we've been going 2 hours, but I think with the committee's indulgence, we'll do the next item and then we'll call it quits. So the next item is compliance with our Privacy Act. Thank you, Ali. Take your report as read. Any further information or key highlights you want to bring to the committee's attention?
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. For this report, I've focused more on actions we take to try and prevent breaches from happening, and so I've outlined a bit about my role as Privacy Officer in undertaking education with staff, training all the new staff members when they arrive, and ongoing information that we put out through our staff newsletter to try and highlight the importance of privacy and the Privacy Act requirements.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? My only question is I assume these privacy breaches were minor and didn't require notification to the Privacy Commissioner.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. And if there's no further questions or comments, can I have a mover for the recommendation, please? Mayor Scott, seconded Councillor Peter. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. 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 No further business. Declare the meeting closed. Thank you for your spirited bidding.